WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We Should Know is on the air. I'm J.W. Simmons, your host. It's always a pleasure to be here each and every week to bring you information and to some degree educate you on some things that's going on right in your community or in the state that impacts your life. Critically important to us is making sure that those folks we bring are people that do the job, that are, quote, the experts in the field. And today we're right there. We're going to talk about school resource officers, schools starting back, the importance of those jobs, and why we might need to support those folks a little more maybe than we have been. They're throughout the state of North Carolina, and this morning we have with us James Jones. James has a history in law enforcement. James, you got a family that's been involved in law enforcement. A lot of folks like me and others probably remember your father, Jimmy. And
yes, sir.
You come from down in the Harrells area. You have some trademark things I thought was interesting. Not only were you third generation law enforcement officer, but the fact that you went through law enforcement training in the basic law enforcement training school. But the interesting thing is you started out at Topsail Beach as a law enforcement officer down there. And according to the information you gave me on your bio, you kind of got tired of playing with the turtles down there and decided to come back to Sampson County.
Yes, sir. Well, it was partly the turtles and it was partly the hurricanes. And I really wanted to come back and help the community that had helped raise me.
Well, and the other thing that was interesting is that when you came back here, when you actually started, I think it was 2007 with the Sheriff's Department, both you and your father, as best we can understand, it's kind of a first, where both of you working in law enforcement.
Yes, sir. It was actually 2003. He retired in 2007.
That's right. He retired, and you were at 2003, so you've got 19 years of service.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, we were actually to as much as I know, the first father and son to actually work at the sheriff's office together.
Well, it's a profession, I think, that is not getting the positive attention that it should get, and certainly we're going to try to touch on some of those things. But as you progress through that, you've had experience as patrol deputy, you've served warrants, you've been in the detective division. The big thing that was interesting to me is that as you evolved into the law enforcement community, particularly with the Sheriff's Department, according to your comments, you felt like you needed something with a little more steady hours, because what folks may not understand with that investigation division thing, it can get really erratic, can it not?
Yes, sir. I really enjoyed working in the detective division. However, there was some weeks that I'd spend more time at the office than I would at home. And like I tell people, with everything, as time goes by, your priorities change. And when I moved over to the school resource officer, I just had a daughter. So I wanted to be able to be a family man and be around, and for them not to say that they had a father that was never home.
Absolutely. Children changes your life forever, no doubt.
Yes, sir.
I think the interesting thing was your opportunity came to you, the door opened for you to be a school resource officer, and you stepped through that door, and it gave you more from your comments, it gave you more sense of a steady kind of hourly thing where you knew where you were going to be. It was not really you were going to be expected to, all of a sudden somebody had a break in, you get called out at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Most definitely. And like I said, now, when I was first offered it, I'd asked for the more steady job. I had thought of everything except for a school resource officer. However, when you ask for something and somebody gives it to you, you don't turn it down.
Exactly. Especially if you ask for it.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't really look good on your record, does it?
Yes, sir. That's right.
So I think one of the things that's interesting to me is that you gathered over the past 19 years, you've literally got thousands of hours of training.
Yes, sir.
You have garnered the position as not only an instructor in the state of North Carolina, you're a certified instructor. You can teach certain courses in law enforcement, especially general instruction, BLET, and those kinds of things, anywhere in the state.
Yes, sir.
Also, you moved right on into the position that you can now teach that specialty block in school resource officer, which is a whole nother dominion for North Carolina that folks have to have specialty training for. You also hold an advanced certificate for law enforcement here in the state, field training officer. You're a certified field training officer. That means you can go out and train other folks in the profession, which is highly credentialed. And a lot of this takes time, and a lot of it is time that's not always on the clock. You might be doing some things off the clock to continue to improve your credentials. Oh, yes, sir, because even though the day stops at, say, 4 o'clock, there's always things to be done. If you're taking a class online through the Justice Academy, sometimes you don't get all your work done, so you have to work past that time. I can remember when I was in instructor school, I stayed up till 2 o'clock one morning and then had to be back down there at Wilmington at 7 the next morning. So it just never stops. I mean, between that and the phone calls and different things, yes, sir. I mean, it never stops. One of the things I want to try to cover today as we had this conversation is to get folks to not only know you a bit better, but also understand and erase maybe some of the assumptions out there as it relates to SROs versus just what the regular duties of a deputy are. You guys are in schools, and when you selected this job and you got in it, what was your kind of first awakening when you walked out there and here you are a school resource officer and you walk in that school? Number one, what were you anticipating? And what did your experience when you get there? How did that change? Yes, sir. Well, first off, I was lucky enough to get put in the south end of the county, which was Union High School, where I graduated from. Familiar area. Yes, sir. So now, when I walked into that school that first day, I didn't know exactly what I could do, what I couldn't do. I was just walking around in awe, I guess you might say. But I can recall walking through the halls and speaking with the kids and things like that, and they would not even acknowledge me because I was somebody new. Because the key to the school resource officer is to be there for a while, to build rapport with the students, faculty, and families and parents. And so they didn't know me. So I'd walk down the hallway and I'd speak to the kids and things like that. They would act as if I wasn't even there. However, fast forward many years, now I know a lot of the parents. I've had siblings. Sometimes I'm dealing with the kids of some of the kids that I've seen come through since I've been there. I think one of the interesting things with you and your career track is that it took you back to an environment that you literally grew up in as a student. Yes, sir. And now you're walking around as a person that is there to help those kids and kind of encourage them in that role, also to ensure of their safety and prevent problems that come up. So those halls and those classrooms, and you may even know some of the teachers, completely changed. You had to refocus your direction and your attention in a whole nother area. Yes, sir. Because, the funny thing was the principal that was there was Mr. Daughtry, and he was the principal I had in high school. And, but like I said, it was nice to be in a familiar place, but it was a whole nother world that I had to fall into. When I think about school resource officers, it's a job that I believe is cut out for you within the first week at least. If this don't fit, you just need to go ahead and find something else to do. Is that a reasonable way to look at it? Yes, sir. It takes a special person to work in the school, because not everything is enforcement action that we do. We do a lot of counseling. We do a lot of educating. We do sometimes have to do enforcement action. However, that's the last resort that we try to do. But majority of our time is spent counseling students in order to help them make better choices, because our goal is just like everybody else's goal. We want them to become productive citizens. To me, I want folks to kind of get a picture of schools and expectations of schools. I know when I grew up in high school, it's completely different probably when you grew up in high school. Yes, and fast forwarding, the role of the school resource officer as a person of identity is much about prevention and helping children, more so even than the whole idea of enforcement. But keep in mind, you can touch on this, I'm sure, but you're a sworn law enforcement officer with full powers of arrest. So that is that the kind of the last resource you want to
Yes, sir. Like you said, we have full arrest powers. We have full authority of just like any deputy in Sampson County. However, we are stationed to where we work a certain school district or certain schools. But yeah, what we try to do is we try to do any type of diversion plans, such as teen court, counseling, and things like that, to help the kids before they actually have to go through the juvenile court system.
It's not just some people, and you can read this if you're doing research, or you see it a lot of times in news media. People that don't understand what you do say, well, these guys, it's just classroom to prison. That's the only thing they're thinking about. But it's kind of almost the opposite, is it not? Yes,
sir, because I'll be honest with you. Since I've been in there, since 2007, since I've went to the schools, every situation that I've ever dealt with, I've looked at it as if it was my child sitting across the table. If I could, after I would get finished, I would say, would I feel comfortable with that if that was my child? And I've never been able to check no to any of those boxes. So I do whatever I can to help these kids. And sometimes people take the juvenile court system as a negative. However, it's the exact opposite, because the juvenile system is there to help the students, help the kids, the juveniles, so that they don't get into the prison. So it's some people see it as a consequence. However, it's there to try to help them get in line before they get old enough where they could go to prison.
It sounds like it's kind of society's way of turning something in a different direction before it completely bottoms out.
Yes, sir. I mean, they help with mental health. They help with counseling, all types of things that maybe the parents couldn't get the help with. They can fast track a lot of that and help them with skill building processes, such as if they have a drug problem, drug counseling, mental health counseling, problem solving counseling, and all sorts of things like that.
We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment. We're talking about school resource officers. We're talking with Sergeant Jones. We'll be back in a moment.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home, so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Welcome back. J.W. Simmons, your host. The name of the show is We Should Know. We appreciate you being here today. Our guest today is Sergeant Jones. And Sergeant Jones, you're with the SRO division with the Sampson County Sheriff's Department. And the folks that you work with in the community of SROs protect our children, and in my case, my grandchildren.
Yes, sir.
In the public schools in this area. But the interesting thing is, James, is your organization is a pretty big deal. I mean, nationally, there's the National Association of School Resource Officers. I mean, that's a huge operation. There's a lot of research and analysis goes into what you do. Kind of walk us through the historical development from your perspective and your involvement of SROs. I'm just going to give you a leeway to take that and run with it.
Well, first off, the first time I remember an SRO was when I was in high school in 1995, my freshman year. It was my SRO's John Blanchard. Everybody remembers the SRO. The SRO sometimes doesn't remember their name, but everybody remembers him, because I have kids all the time. Hey, Mr. Jones, how you doing? And I feel bad, but I don't remember all their names, but I can remember faces. And so a student going to school always remembers the cop in their school. So we are always in the limelight all the time, off duty and on duty, because even out of your uniform, they'll recognize you, the young kids. So the SRO program started here in Sampson County back in 1995, around that time. That's the first time I really remember them. And they started with 5 officers. Well, it stayed that way up until maybe 3 years ago or so, and we got a grant with the school system. The school system and the sheriff's office worked together to get a grant, and we added 3 positions. So we went from 5 to 8. And then we got 3 more, and Now we have a total, well, we got 2 more. So we have a total of 10 officers in the schools now. So we've doubled from the start of the program, and no officer has over 2 schools that they actually service. Some of them only have 1, but nobody has over 2. So it's came a long way, and I would like to see maybe one day, my goal is to have 1 per school before it's over with. But time will tell. Rome wasn't built in a day. So we've made progress, but there's still progress to be made. But before, back when the program first started, you could take an officer straight out of BLET and you could put them into a school. Now, with that being said, not always, but sometimes that was a bad choice because, number one, the officer didn't know how to interact with the juvenile populace, and also that officer didn't really know a lot about the law enforcement job. And dealing with juveniles is totally different than dealing with adults. So you have to be up on your juvenile law and you have to understand it and things like that. Well, a couple years ago, they made a new rule where they the only way you could go into a school was after you had your general certification, which is basically your first year of law enforcement under your belt. So you'll get out in other areas and get experience and learn more, and then you can do it. But also with that, when you go into the school, you have up to that first school year or so, you have to take the school resource officers training, which also, like you said before, that I instruct to officers of different counties. And it's a 40-hour block of training that goes over different things such as the roles of the SRO, it goes over gang activity, gang awareness, exceptional children, juvenile mental health, problem solving, campus safety. And then finally at the end on Friday, you have to do a presentation as if you were in a classroom doing a presentation. You have to do a 10-minute presentation. So it kind of, in that 40-hour week, it encompasses the whole school year, a little bit of touches on a little bit of everything. And also with that, the state required that, but also only the SROs have to take an extra block of in-service training that we take every year to hold our certification, because now a school resource officer is a certification in which you have to uphold every year by taking that extra in-service training.
It sounds like the profession itself is becoming more and more highly credentialed because they keep putting additional weight on your training and your experience level and that kind of thing.
Yes, sir. And there's been some negative incidents in the past that we've all seen on the news and things like that. And I think part of this is to try to help eliminate a lot of that, because I can tell you, dealing with kids is unlike dealing with adults, because, you can take that kid and you can talk to them about what could happen and things like that. They don't have the same mindset that me or you do as far as consequences, because juveniles are very, they don't think, they do. They don't think about consequences and things like that. They
have that experimentation mind.
Yes, sir. Ready
to try anything.
That's right. And they don't think about what's in the future, what could happen out of that situation. So, so you have to learn how to talk to them and things like that. And like I said, when I first went in, the only kid I was around was about this long and she didn't talk. So I didn't know how to do it. So over the years, I've gotten extremely better. And then I also, growing up with my kids, I kind of try to keep up with what they're doing so that I can have things to talk about with the different kids in school. Unfortunately, the last 2 years has been such a challenge with the COVID that's been into schools and things like that. We really have not been able to interact the way we normally would. Mm-hmm.
When you're teaching officers to do the job that they're doing, and you just went over some that's in the basic training for SROs, and you look at that class, and you're standing up there as an instructor, and you look out, can you kind of look? Do you start getting some mental signals or cues of folks you're thinking, this person might be good? I don't know where this. Is there there's body language speak to you and say, this is the kind of person that's going to work?
Yeah, because normally what I do, the first thing I ask is, who wanted to be an SRO? Raise your hand. Who was told they were going to be an SRO? Raise your hand. And, and you'll kind of figure out by there. But And I'll be honest with you, I had a totally different outlook on the SRO before, touching on what we talked about earlier. I thought it really didn't do anything. I mean, I don't remember mine doing anything. However, that first week that I got there, we don't do a lot of work on the radio. However, our cell phones, that's the way the schools get up with us. I mean, you spend all day on your phones because they'll call you on things like that. So you do so much stuff that nobody knows because everything is over the phone and it's not over the county radio. But, when you look at a class, I mean, a lot of times you can kind of tell because that one that was made to go, I mean, they will do a good job because, that's what we're here to do. However, they won't have the same passion, I guess you might say, as the person that requested to go.
One of the things I heard you say that came across to me is the job is not just checking the blocks.
No, sir.
You sometimes find yourself way over here somewhere or spending that extra hour or that person that maybe you were really concerned about, you might want to follow up and you're thinking, well, this is not, I could be doing something else. Yeah. Is that what you're talking about? That core sense of, I care that much?
Yes, sir. Because once you get in there and you really start working with these kids, they become yours. You don't just have 2 at home. You have 450. Like I said, I'm happy to have the help that we've got now. However, sometimes I do miss of running all the schools where I would see them in kindergarten, see them grow up and then go to the next school and go to the middle school and go to the high school. I do miss some of those steps that I don't have anymore. However, I mean, it's a lot better with extra help because all you had time to do then was put out fires by running. Like I ran the Union District, so I had 4 schools. My office was at the high school. Then I would service the middle school, intermediate school, and the elementary school. But I do miss seeing them walk in at kindergarten, and then moving on and growing up. And, when I'd see them in high school, I could tell them, I said, I watched you grow up and things like that. But it is a job that you truly have to be called for. Yes, sir.
James, do you find yourself positioned, and this is just, I'm trying to get a picture of how you start your day at school. Do you position yourself where you see those kids coming in the door, and is that where you start looking at signs of somebody you might want to follow up with this person, or you might want to follow up with that person, or how do you connect is what I'm saying.
And see, with every school is different. Now, my particular school, I try to start in the parking lot and sit in the middle so that I could see the car riders being dropped off and see the kids coming off the buses. So I'm not particularly right there.
You kind of see where they're coming from.
Yeah. And make sure everything's flowing good and things like that. While I am doing that, I am also going through reports on our computer to see what happened in the community last night, to see if there's anything that could spill over into the school today. And things like that. So that's the way I typically start my day out. And then I'll go in and they'll be changing classes, eating breakfast, on a typical lunch day, on a typical school day. They're usually in there eating breakfast and things like that, and you can kind of pick up on things. And if the counselor comes up with something, or the school social worker, they'll usually bring you in and talk and have you talk with them, and things like that. And the thing is, it's like I tell kids all the time, I'm here to help you. However, the only way I can is if you tell me. Unfortunately, I'm not a mind reader, and we do what we can to we do what we can, because if you see that kid that's happy-go-lucky every day, and then all of a sudden they walk in and their shoulders are slouched and things like that, there's something wrong. So then somebody will pull them to the side and things like that, because I talk to all types of kids, and but the teachers sometimes will send a lot of things to the counselor, and then me and the counselor will go together and hit the topic.
So your interaction with the teacher is crucial to you being able to make sure that you kind of compare notes to make sure that you're headed, both of you guys are seeing the same thing. Yes, it kind of helps validate, I guess.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I want to kind of follow up on that when we come back from break and talk a bit about that confidence building piece that I kind of heard in the background you saying that's very critical. So let's follow up on that.
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to seeing you again in just a moment. We're talking about schools. We're talking about children. We'll be back in a moment.
At home or away, knowing who is at your door is priceless. Star Communications is here to help with its doorbell security camera by Skybell. Live viewing and two-way audio equips you with the ability to always see and greet anyone that shows up at your door. If this is the kind of confidence you are looking for, call Star Communications today at 1-800-706-6538 to learn more about this intelligent security that you can always depend on.
The name of the show is We Should Know. I'm J.W. Simmons, your host. We're talking about children. We're talking about SROs. And when I think about SROs, Sergeant Jones, I think about the safety and security of those children in schools. The SROs that you represent right here in this county is also that uniform, and what you do is represented and replicated throughout the state and the nation.
Yes, sir.
North Carolina has a very rigid training requirement and training responsibilities. One of the key things when we were going to break that we were touching on is how you build a level of confidence with that individual child. And that came up as a result of you seeing the kids come in, you're watching the what's going on in the parking lots. But it seems to me that confidentiality piece is crucial.
Yes, sir, because, every kid at every school is worried about being labeled a snitch. So when you talk with these kids, you can never, you always have to be straightforward and you have to be honest with them, because all these kids network. Mm-hmm. And if I lie to this one, he's going to tell this one, and you could be burned through all the schools. So the biggest thing is, we're straight up, we're honest with everybody, and we talk to these kids. And, when we do find out information, we never give where we found it out at. We also have, little things where they can drop notes in different schools, and things they want to talk to. They'll tell teachers. Teachers will tell us that we might not, talk with the kid. But when we find out any type of issue, we do everything we can to investigate it. And sometimes we do have to actually talk to kids, because our goal, and my goal since I've came into the schools, is to make these schools safer for every student in Sampson County. And the biggest thing is to make it a better place for my kids. Mm-hmm. Because I have kids that go to school there, and I'm invested, and that's why I'm there, to make it a better place for my kids as well as every other student in the schools.
You said something early on that kind of ties back to this. It sounds like that you kind of have to build a rapport so you're in that child's eyes, that you're not seen as a threat, that
Yes,
you're
sir.
seen as somebody that they can trust and they can depend on. Is that hard? And then at whatever point in time, is that ever violated, or do you just try to never violate that?
You try to never violate it, because, like I said, a man is only good as his word. So what we try to do is we try to build a rapport with the students as well as their families, because the thing is, it's like I explained to a parent that I was talking with this morning. I might go to your house as a road officer. I might not never go back to your house ever again.
That's right.
But the dealings that I have with you in school today, the kid's going to be there tomorrow. The parents is probably going to be back in order for them to pick them up or something like that. So it's a totally different thing, because I'm going to see you and your child every day, possibly, and things like that. So the thing is, sometimes you have to be firm. However, you can be tactful with whatever you're doing. And with the kids, we try to build relationships because we want them to come talk to us. If there is something that's going to happen, we want somebody to tell us, because those kids will tell each other all types of things that they're not going to tell an adult. So if we want the kids to talk to us, because we're there to help, but the only way we can help is if we know.
It's almost like I'm hearing you say that when you're communicating with that child, that you get a window, although small it may be, of that child's home, that child's life, what's going on in that child's life. All of that starts to appear.
Yes, sir. Because there's been so many over the years that some of them I know more about their family than I know about my own. Mm-hmm. Where I spent so much time with them. And like I said, and I try to give every kid advice, and I've talked with some kids in the past that had a bad home life and things like that. And it's like I explained to them, I said, one day you're going to grow up and you're going to have children. I said, what your goal is to not have a home life the way you have. And, and if it's so bad, we did contact social services and things like that and get them involved. But, it's amazing. I took for granted so much of my childhood until I started working in these schools. Because, let's be real, everybody everybody thinks everybody's like them. Yeah. The way you were raised, the way I was raised, everybody thinks that everybody's like them. I did not realize how lucky I was until I started working in these schools and coming up in a 2-parent home and with parents that loved me and took care of me and things like that, until I started getting in here and talking with these kids and realizing how many of them did not have that at home.
From your experience, and I wanted to try to get this in because it seems like the show goes fast, but
yes, sir.
From your experience, what do we need to do as a community, as just a larger community, churches and other organizations, to help improve the child's life that may not have that advantage that you just alluded to?
Yeah. And
how do we address that?
And that's such a complex question. There's so many things. I personally think one of the biggest downfalls is the mental health system now. Whereas people don't get it because they're scared to be labeled and things like that. Right. And at some point, every point in somebody's life, you need to talk to somebody about something. But a lot of people are scared to do that. And a lot of people don't want to admit that maybe their kid needs it because they're scared that it could be a reflection upon them, But there's a lot of times when counseling and things like that could really help out with issues and problems that would prevent it from growing on to be something bigger, later on down the road.
The idea of shaming and bullying in schools, and we alluded to, a while ago a little bit to the technology piece now with Facebook and that kind of thing. How do you recognize that and how do you intervene with that if you see that going on?
Yeah, because, just talking about that, the bullying is a whole different animal now than what it used to be. Before, it would just only be at school. Now with these kids with their cell phones and their different apps and social media and things like that, they can never get away from it. I deal with that all the time. That's one of the main things. And, that's not even something that happens at school. That happens while they're at home, but then it comes into school and I do what I can to combat that. But, because the kid is, if before when you had that kid that was getting picked on, it was only during school hours. Now when they leave, that person is constantly posting something on their page or whatever. They can never get away from it. And a lot of times the kids are scared to tell their parents about what's going on, but that is the first step. And then, once they come in, I talk with their parents about how to lock apps down so that the kids can't download them. Because a lot of parents don't realize how they can keep their kids from getting these apps, because they'll say, I delete them, but they put them back on. However, if you put the password in their app store, they can't download an app without that password that you have. So then I give, parents avenues to try to help combat that by not letting them download those type apps. And the bottom line is social media sometimes causes so much more problems than good that it is. But as far as the communities, the churches, the churches do a lot for youth and things like that. I have a strong belief that, children that have those type of things are a lot better than children that don't. I try to do what I can to have my children in church and things like that. And I can see over the years where it has really helped them in order to make good choices and look in the world in a different way.
I see you guys a lot. If I go to a ball game at one of the schools or what have you, I know a lot of folks. So I'll see you guys out there and speak and so forth. How important is sports to children and to maintaining that stable and that should I say solid mental picture for that child?
I believe it's very important, because what happens is you might have a kid that might act up in school, But if they're playing football and they get in trouble in school and then they have to run laps after school and things like that, it might straighten them up. And with anything, if you have something positive, that cuts out time for negative activities. If you have something positive to do after school. Yeah,
it sounds like we're talking about the more structure we got,
yes, sir,
and understanding rules and working with others, it kind of is built in through that, whether it's soccer, football, baseball, whatever it is, it kind of builds that in.
Yes, sir, because I'm a firm believer that expectations need to be laid out at the beginning. Once the expectations are laid out, then there's no question what that person expects. And with everything, structure is a key role into everything that the schools, as well as, because it's like I tell people, when I counsel kids all the time, I tell them, these school rules, they're setting you up for life because there's laws of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. You've got to follow the school rules, and you've also got to follow the laws of North Carolina. So one day when you grow up, you're never going to be able to do in life exactly what you want to do. Mm-hmm. There's always somebody that's going to be holding you accountable for something. So the school rules is basically like training you when you get older to follow the laws of North Carolina and the federal government.
It's almost like you're in some ways teaching respect.
Yes, sir. Because and that's one thing that I've always done. I've always started off and be really, really respectful with whoever I'm dealing with, because the only way that you get respect is a lot of time give respect. And with these kids being at that young age with those hormones coming in and things like that, they're all about the respect. Mm-hmm. So you can't talk down to a child because I'm grown.
Yeah.
And I've always, with me doing that, I've always had a good rapport with kids, because there's been many a time I've had a kid and in my office and I just let them sort of vent per se, mm-hmm. because a lot of times they feel that nobody hears them. Mm-hmm. So after they would get done explaining to me what happened, I'd say, well, I understand what you're doing. However, the next time you need to handle it this way. And that, give them a better option in order to handle the problem.
And that key thing right there in understanding I think is so important, because I look at it and I kind of see what you guys do, and I'm thinking that's so critical. We're going to take a break and we'll come back and we'll pick up on some more detailed stuff.
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We're talking about SROs. We're talking about the role they have in your schools and the important role in your children's lives. We'll be back in a moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
We want to thank you for being with us today on We Should Know. Again, I'm J.W. Simmons, your host. I want to stop just for a moment and remind you can reach us at weshouldknowedu@gmail. weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. You can send us a card, Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. Just address that We Should Know, or WSK. And we just look every week to hear your comments, what you thought about shows, our guests. Would you like to hear more about that subject or that topic? Maybe another version or another observation you would like to hear? We want to know that, and we usually try to investigate that and get it to you as soon as possible. In the days of COVID, some of the things that we want to do, we're not able to get folks here simply because of the capability and the strategy. As you know, we've done a number of Zoom shows, not necessarily the best platform. I like to be in the same room with folks, but we're trying to get key people and key information to you. So I want to thank you for staying with us. I want to thank you for these past 11 years and being part of this show, and you're a critical reason we are here. So we look forward to seeing you again each week. This last segment's coming up, and we're talking about SROs, and we're talking with Sergeant Jones with the Sampson County Sheriff's Department with the SROs. And James, you recognize, and I think in your position, you represent well the SROs, because we started out talking about training. I want to flip back to that a little bit. Not only have you completed all the thousands of hours of training yourself, you've got 19 years in, but you are an instructor, a general instructor.
Yes, sir.
Anybody in the state, I keep making that point. This is just not local, but when you become an instructor, you can teach law enforcement subjects to anybody in law enforcement that are certified. The other thing is that you have the credentials also to teach in the SRO specialized training.
Yes, sir.
That specialized training has been somewhat uptick now to somewhere like 400 hours. Talk to us about
yes,
that.
Sir. With that basic block, you have to do that before you can go into the school. But also, that's one of the core classes that you have to have for the advanced SRO certificate program through the Justice Academy. I've completed that as well as 5 other of our SROs. So right now we have 6 SROs that have their advanced SRO certificate. Now with that, that's a 400-hour course in which you have to take certain subjects, and it's all dealing with school resource, community policing, and things like that. Community policing and things like that. But with that 400 hours, you get a plaque that you can hang on your wall and things like that. So my goal is for the other 4 that we have left to get it, because my goal is for every SRO to have that advanced SRO certificate. Because like I said, with those 400 specialized hours of training, it goes over all different types of things that'll help you in the school every day. Yes, sir.
You guys get a lot of training and specialty training in like crisis intervention.
Yes, sir.
trainings.
We also take we do it here at local for the sheriff's office. We require our SROs to take CIT training, crisis intervention training, and it helps when somebody is having a mental crisis. Because the thing is, when people have crises, it might not be anything to me or you, but their whole world is coming down in their eyes. So we all have taken that, and the ones that hadn't taken it, I actually have them signed up for next month to take a course in that, so that they can see some of the signs and know how to talk to these people and help them basically calm themselves down. You know, because there's been so many times when I've sat and looked in a student's eyes, and you know, when they're hyperventilating, and just told them to follow my breaths and breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and just to work themselves down to where they could actually breathe. And you know, and I stand there and I just say it over and over, and it's like we don't have to think about it to breathe, but when you're in a intense situation, you have to think about it.
You're doing that panic mode.
Yes, sir.
You know, one of the things that you mentioned too, I think is important for folks to understand, is that the kinds of things that you and all of the folks that work with you as SROs go through this, and they're able to use those skills. In some cases, it's kind of life-saving experiences.
That's right. That's right. Because I mean, if you're not there to help calm them down, because you know the whole thing with the SRO is the triad. You're the educator, you're the mentor, the educator, and the law enforcement officer. Well, there should be another part where you're a mental health helper, I guess you might say, because like I said, I mean, these kids, they have so many things going on that to me or you is nothing. But right there at that point of their life, that's their whole life in front of them. And I explain to them all the time, I said, in 3 weeks, I said, nobody's going to ever remember this. I said, however, in their mind, people's going to remember it forever.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's very important to them.
And I think one of the things you mentioned, too, is that and the question would be this: during these 18 months, 19 months we've been involved with COVID, there's been a lot of conversation about its behavioral impact on children. What are you seeing with children, and how is some of that related to the COVID experience?
Because see, it's kind of like right now. I mean, this is the first week of school. Some of them hadn't been there in over a year and a half, because some kids did not come back to school last year. They chose to be remote the whole year. So it's kind of like starting over. And that structure of getting up, being at school and having to stand in lines and things like that. And, in the mask, I mean, it's like I said, it's like I explained to some people, I said, everybody hates wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. However, if they wear the mask and it can keep them in school, that's the whole goal. Mm-hmm. Because nobody is going to learn sitting in behind a computer the way they would in the classroom with a teacher. Mm-hmm. So that, that's the whole purpose of the mask. There's a lot of pushback on the mask, and I understand. I mean, I hate that my son has to wear it. However, if that will help to keep them in school where they don't have to send out a whole classroom and where everybody wears their mask to protect themselves, I'm for my kids wearing it, so that they can be in school and get the education that they need. But back with that, with some of them being out a year and a half, it's almost like starting over. Mm-hmm. As far as I watch some come in, and it's almost like the kids have to learn how to communicate with each other, because where they've been so isolated, they hadn't been having that interaction. And, I sit and watch, and, now with the technology thing that everybody sits and texts and things like that, I think about it all the time. You go in a doctor's office, used to, you would sit in the waiting room and you would talk with different people or things like that. Now you look and everybody's like this. Nobody's talking to anybody. Everybody's in their own world with that phone. And I see that a lot with these kids, especially now where they've been sitting at home this whole time. And it's like they have to kind of relearn their areas of communication.
When you mentioned that, it struck me there was a piece I read a while back that talked about the interpersonal relationship or the lack thereof with children. And part of that spoke to the technology, that people were not able to do what we're doing now, just have a conversation.
Yes, sir.
The other part was that with now the addition of masks and the COVID era, 18, 19 months with masks, it has actually exacerbated that lack of being able to communicate with each other, and the sometimes combativeness that is created with children in schools. They tend to be more confrontational.
Right.
That it? Are you seeing that?
And well, not particularly yet, but like I said, this is only the 5th day, because this is our first week back with everybody. However, if you just look at the news, it's like, when the lockdowns were lifted and things like that, all the different stories on the news, the people fighting at gas stations and things like that. It's like people totally lost their whole sense of how to get along with other people. Gone. Yes, sir, because they didn't have to use it. And, with anything, especially training or anything else, if you don't use it, a lot of times you lose it. So I hope that as we ease back in, I hope that a lot of that's going to be overcome and everybody will go back to normal before long is what I'm hoping.
And we're coming up to the last 3 minutes or so of the show, but I want to try to get this question out. When you go into school, when you get up, you put your uniform on, you go out there and you pull up on that schoolyard, what is the thing that's in your mind that you're thinking about that almost prayerfully you go, let this not happen at this school? And because we've seen everything from shootings to you name it, what one thing it really concerns you the most? And you might not be able to boil it down to one thing, but is there one thing that just kind of gravitates with you to say, just let me not have this happen here?
Yeah, I have to say, every day I always hope and pray that everything will go good that day for my staff and my students. But, with anything, the biggest thing that we do not want, that any of us do not want to happen is, to have an active shooter and things like that. But I hope and pray that I always have the wisdom and the advice that I can give to people to help them make good choices. But we really, the active shooters, school shootings and things like that, we hope and pray that they never happen here.
Just a quick question here, and again, we're getting down to about a minute, but do we have a gang problem in Sampson County?
Overall, there is some gang issues. I wouldn't say that it was like a strong epidemic or, things like that. But, with anything that you have there, even in rural areas, you do have some issues. But we do also, that was part of that stuff there where we actually get training in that. So we know how to recognize that problem and help give the guidance that the kids need.
And that kind of gets back to the conversation we had about football or sports or what have you. it's much better for kids to be involved in sports than decide they got to gravitate to a criminal group.
Yes, sir.
I think that's the big thing that I hear a lot of folks say. Let's keep the kids in productive environments.
That's right. Yeah, because I'm a firm believer that as the parent, if you don't raise the kids, there will be somebody there that will, and it might not be the way you want them raised.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for being with us today. We're coming up on closure here, and your expertise, our prayers that you're able to continue and doing the good things you're doing, and all those folks that work with you as well. When we do these shows, we look for folks like you with expertise. And again, thank you for being with us today.
All right. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being with us. We look forward to seeing you again next week on We Should Know with a subject that's timely and it's something that you can use that'll help you. And may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.